Beyond Ragnar, lesser-known Viking sagas you should know. They say history remembers the bold, the loud, and the victorious. And when it comes to Vikings, one name echoes louder than most: Ragnar Lothbrok. His legend has been sung through centuries, told and retold until he became more myth than man. But behind Ragnar's shadow lies an ocean of forgotten tales, stories of warriors, explorers, queens, and poets who carved their names into the North's frozen winds. This is the world beyond Ragnar, a world where the sagas whisper of those who fought, ruled, and dreamed in ways history rarely remembers. Imagine standing on the edge of the North Sea 1,000 years ago. The air smells of salt and smoke, the horizon glows with a red dawn, and a fleet of longships cuts through the mist-like blades of destiny. Each vessel carries not just men with axes, but stories, living legends whose lives would inspire the sagas that defined an age. Yet most of those names never made it into modern retellings. Their stories were buried under waves of conquest and time, waiting for someone to listen again. One of them was Egil Skallagrimsson, a warrior, a poet, and perhaps one of the most complex souls ever born under the northern sky. Egil was no simple Viking hero. He was brilliant and brutal, cursed with rage and blessed with words that could move kings. The saga says that as a child, he killed another boy over a game, and as a man, he composed poems so beautiful they could melt the hearts of enemies. He once faced King Eirik Bloodaxe, a ruler so fierce even his name dripped with terror. Facing death, Egil did not raise his sword, he raised his voice. Through poetry, he begged for his life, not with fear but with pride, turning his death sentence into one of the most haunting verses in Norse literature. That night, the poet-warrior lived, not because of strength, but because of the power of words. In a world where blood ruled, Egil proved that a mind could conquer a blade. Then there was Aud the Deep-Minded, a woman whose story defied every expectation of her time. After her husband's death in battle, Aud refused to live as a widow waiting for fate. Instead, she built her own ship, not for war, but for freedom. With her family and followers, she sailed across the Atlantic, settling in Iceland long before Columbus even dreamed of crossing oceans. Her leadership was wise, her courage unmatched. She ruled her people with fairness and vision, and when she died, she was buried in a high place overlooking the sea, as if she could keep watching over the world she helped shape. Aud's saga reminds us that not all Vikings sought power through violence, some sought it through creation, exploration, and courage of spirit. But perhaps no story captures the heart of the Viking soul more than that of Hrolf Kraki, a king who walked the thin line between legend and myth. His saga tells of a ruler whose courage was so great that even his enemies respected him. Betrayed by kin and hunted by fate, Hrolf faced his final battle knowing he would fall. Yet he chose to fight not for victory, but for honor. The story says that as his hall burned and his warriors fell, he stood unyielding, his sword blazing in the firelight like the last star of a dying age. To the Norse, that was the ultimate victory, not survival, but facing destiny without fear. There are darker tales too. Consider Hervor, the Shieldmaiden who walked through fire to claim her birthright, the cursed sword Tyrfing. When her father was slain, and her kin buried the blade in his grave to contain its doom, Hervor summoned his spirit from the dead to demand it back. The saga describes her standing in the night, surrounded by flames, as the undead king rose from his mound, warning her of the curse. But she would not be denied. She took the sword anyway, because to her, living without courage was a fate worse than death. That scene, a lone woman defying the underworld itself, remains one of the most powerful moments in all Norse lore. Hervor's story isn't about victory, it's about the courage to face the darkness within and around us. Then there is Grettir the Strong, the outlaw hero who lived and died on the edge of humanity. His saga feels almost tragic, as if written for a world that was beginning to lose faith in its heroes. Grettir was cursed with strength beyond reason but doomed never to find peace. He fought monsters, men, and fate itself, but his greatest battle was with loneliness. Banished and hunted, he spent years surviving in the wild, half legend, half ghost. In the end, Grettir's strength could not save him, but his defiance turned him into something more enduring than flesh, a symbol of the eternal struggle between men and fate. The Vikings believed the world was woven by the Norns, three sisters who spun, measured, and cut the threads of every life. Yet these sagas show that even knowing their fate, the Norse refused to bow to it. They met destiny like old friends, with a nod, a smile, and a sword in hand. That's what made them unforgettable. It wasn't just what they conquered, but how they lived knowing everything ends. Another tale, often forgotten, is that of Gudrun Osvifsdottir, a woman whose life was marked by love, loss, and vengeance. Her story, from the Laxdæla saga, begins with beauty and ends with blood. Gudrun was said to be the most beautiful woman in Iceland, but beauty in the sagas was never a blessing. She loved deeply, lost tragically, and plotted revenge with chilling precision. Yet beneath her fury was a heart that longed for peace. When asked which of her husbands she loved most, she replied, "To him I was worst." That single line captures the ache of the Viking heart, a mixture of pride, pain, and self-awareness that feels timeless. And what of the explorers, those who looked beyond the map's edge? Long before Columbus, there was Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, who sailed west and found Vinland, the land we now call North America. But even before Leif, there was a woman named Gudrid Thorbjarnardóttir, sometimes called the Far-Traveled. She crossed the Atlantic 8 times, from Iceland to Greenland to Vinland and back. She lived among Native Americans, gave birth on foreign soil, and later became a nun. Gudrid's story is not just one of exploration but of human resilience, a reminder that curiosity, not conquest, drives civilization forward. Each of these lives, Egil, Aud, Hrolf, Hervor, Grettir, Gudrun, Gudrid, paints a different shade of the Viking spirit. Together, they reveal a truth that often gets lost in Hollywood's glare of blood and axes. The Vikings were not merely raiders, they were storytellers, dreamers, and seekers of meaning. Their sagas were not propaganda, they were philosophy written in ice and fire. Through them, we glimpse how our ancestors grappled with questions that still haunt us today. What does it mean to live with honor? How do we face fate when it cannot be changed? What legacy do we leave when the world forgets our name? The sagas do not give simple answers. They give us mirrors. In Egil's rage, we see the chaos of genius. In Aud's voyages, we see freedom born from loss. In Hervor's defiance, we see the courage to claim one's destiny. In Grettir's solitude, we feel the price of strength. Each story whispers something we instinctively recognize, that every life, no matter how small, holds the spark of legend. The Norse did not fear the end, they embraced it as part of the story. To die well was to live forever. That's why their sagas endure, because they teach that eternity is not found in avoiding death, but in facing it with open eyes. Ragnar's legend may have burned brightest, but it is in these quieter stories that the real spirit of the Vikings lives on. Picture it now, the flicker of a hearth fire, the creak of a wooden hall, a skald's voice echoing through the dark. The audience leans closer as the storyteller's eyes gleam. "Listen," he says, "for what I tell you is true, or true enough." That was the beauty of a saga. It did not need to be factual to be real. It needed only to be remembered. And in that act of remembering, history became alive again. Maybe that's why these stories still matter. We live in a different age, but the questions are the same. Who are we when fate tests us? What do we stand for when the end feels near? These were the questions that shaped the North, and they are the same questions that shape us still. Beyond Ragnar lies a world richer and more human than we often imagine, a world where kings could be poets, women could be explorers, and courage could mean building instead of burning. Perhaps that's the true legacy of the Vikings, not conquest or empire, but the unbroken chain of storytelling itself. So when you hear the name Ragnar, remember that he was just one voice in a great northern choir. Behind him stand 1,000 others, their songs waiting to be heard again. Each saga, each whisper, each forgotten name is a reminder that history is not made by the famous, it's made by the fearless. And the Vikings, for all their flaws and fury, understood one truth we often forget, that the greatest battle is not against the world, but against the silence that follows us. Tonight, if you close your eyes and listen to the wind, you might still hear them, the laughter of sailors, the clash of steel, the murmur of poets around the fire. The sagas never truly ended. They live wherever stories are told, wherever someone refuses to let the past fade quietly into dust. Beyond Ragnar, there are countless tales yet untold. And maybe, just maybe, one of them is yours.